Have you ever fasted? Eaten nothing for a whole day, or maybe two? Maybe you've tried intermittent fasting, where you've skipped a meal. Some of you may have done it for cultural or religious reasons. Others, just to lose a bit of weight. But I bet that none of you have done it to enhance and boost your brain's energy, to gain mental clarity, or even treat diseases of the brain. But that's exactly what fasting has the potential to do. You see, when you fast, your metabolism shifts, and your body unlocks ancient molecules that boost the brain's energy. You see, your brain is an energy-hungry organ. In fact, it's the most metabolic organ in your body. It weighs just 2% of your body weight, but consumes 20% of your body's main fuel, a sugar called glucose. It's so metabolic that even at rest, your brain uses more sugar than your thigh muscles do when you're running a marathon. And during periods of intense focus, like sitting an exam, it uses even more. But the brain is not just an organ that helps us study and learn. It's the critical control center of our body. Every breath, every heartbeat depend upon it. And therefore, the energy supply to the brain is absolutely critical, and even a small interruption can be catastrophic. In fact, modern neuroscience has shown us that disruptions in the brain's energy could underlie a number of major and serious neurological diseases. Depending upon where in the brain the deficit lies, and depending upon when it occurs, different diseases manifest. One of the clearest is Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is characterized by a progressive loss of memory and cognition. Sadly, many of us have seen it. A loved one, a grandparent, an aunt. It starts with subtle lapses in memory, a forgotten name, a missed appointment. But over time, that forgetfulness progresses, and it turns to a loss of function and ultimately a loss of independence. Alzheimer's disease is typically diagnosed when patients are in their 70s, but we now know that the disease processes start decades before. Brain imaging studies that look at glucose metabolism of the brain show early signs of a metabolic deficit in the brain in people as young as 30 years old. Initially, it's silent with no symptoms, but gradually, over the decades, it progresses, affecting the areas of the brain that control cognition and your memory. So Alzheimer's disease is the end stage of a long continuum of cognitive decline. In young brains, like many of you, your brain metabolism is at 100%, but gradually, with healthy aging, that deficit increases to up to 9%. And if people go on to develop mild cognitive impairment, which is the disease before Alzheimer's disease, the deficit can increase up to 13%. And with time, if those patients then progress onto early Alzheimer's disease, that metabolic shortfall can be up to 18%. The brain is quite literally running out of fuel. And with that, it creates a brain energy gap. But not all diseases manifest slowly. Some strike in seconds. In epilepsy, there are uncontrolled bursts of electrical activity that occur in the brain. These are called seizures. In epilepsy, the picture's slightly different. There's more of a dynamic, localized shift in energy. Energy levels increase and decrease with seizure activity. But the principle is the same. When brain cells don't get enough energy, they start to malfunction. And when enough of them misfire, the brain starts to fail. And for that reason, the brain has developed a mechanism to preserve its energy supply at all costs. You see, the brain is very clever. It has a backup plan. And therefore, when your sugar levels run low, the body still needs to keep the brain functioning. And therefore, it has an alternative fuel source. That fuel is fat. Not fat in the form that we store around our waists. No, the breakdown product of fat, a remarkable set of molecules called ketone bodies, or ketones. Ketones are like the brain's emergency energy supply. They're remarkably efficient at providing brain cells with energy and sustaining them during periods of starvation or increased energy needs. You see, when you fast, even though you're not eating, your brain needs to keep functioning. And the way it does that is quite remarkable. When you don't eat, your sugar levels in your blood start to fall. And with that, we see a drop in a hormone called insulin. That triggers your body to break down your stored fat to free fatty acids, which pass in your bloodstream round to your liver, where they're converted to ketone bodies, the brain's backup fuel. Those ketone bodies then pass through to the brain, where they're eagerly taken up by brain cells that use them to convert them to energy. So when you haven't eaten for hours or days, your brain doesn't run out of energy. It just switches energy supply. So what do these insights point to? Well, if the failing brain is in fact an underfueled brain, then maybe the solution to some of these terrible diseases is to give the brain more energy, but not in the form of sugar and glucose. We know that those mechanisms, glucose metabolism, is broken. Therefore, we need to bypass glucose metabolism and provide energy through another source, through ketone metabolism. And that leads us to a radical idea. What if by rescuing the brain's energy, we can in fact rescue the brain itself? What's remarkable is actually this idea is not so new after all. As far back as the 5th century BC, Hippocrates wrote about patients with epilepsy being treated through the complete abstinence of food and drink. Even in the Bible, Jesus cures a boy with epilepsy through fasting. And this moment is immortalized in a famous painting by Raphael called The Transfiguration, which depicts a boy with epilepsy being cured by Jesus. Fast forward some 2,400 years to 1921, and the American Medical Association reports something astonishing. Fasting could stop seizures. In a famous case, a child with epilepsy, seizures stopped after just 2 days of fasting, and he didn't return for over 2 years. It was deemed as a breakthrough. And yet they noted one problem. You can't fast forever. People need to eat. And that's when Russell Wilder at the Mayo Clinic had a brilliant idea. What if you could have the same benefits as fasting, but without the need for starvation? And he developed a diet composed almost entirely of fat that could mimic the fasting state. And he called it the ketogenic diet. It worked. In children whose seizures had been resistant to medicines, the ketogenic diet almost saw a complete resolution. And over the decades that followed, the ketogenic diet was used in other brain diseases where there was a metabolic deficit. Like in Alzheimer's disease, the ketogenic diet provided ketones which provided the brain areas that controlled memory and cognition, and saw improvement in these symptoms. Ketones quite literally filled the brain energy gap. But unlike the keto diet that some of you may have tried, the medical ketogenic diet is extreme. It's 90% fat with very small amounts of carbohydrate and protein. It's effective, but it's incredibly difficult to follow long term. So researchers started asking a question. Is it possible to get the same metabolic benefits, but without the need for this extreme diet? And that's why today, scientists and biotech companies at the forefront of neurometabolic science are looking to build on these ideas, translating the biology of fasting and ketones into medicine. New drugs are being developed that deliver ketones to the brain, providing the brain with a clean, alternative energy substrate. In essence, we're engineering pharmacology that mimics nature's fasting, mimics the ketogenic state, but does so in a precise, controlled, and sustainable way. And these are not distant ideas. Some of these are in late-stage development with the potential to be approved in the next few years. And the impact is vast. Not just treating a single disease, but potentially treating a whole series where the brain has a shared deficit in glucose metabolism, Alzheimer's and epilepsy, but also we're potentially in Parkinson's, migraine, depression, and even autism. The potential not just to treat millions of patients, but potentially offer hope to billions. This represents a profound shift in how we think about treating neurological disease. For decades, we've developed medicines that have targeted proteins, silenced genes, inhibited receptors. But now we're thinking differently. We're developing drugs that harness nature's metabolism. They harness and focus on the fundamental currency of the cell, its energy, harnessing the backup system that nature developed millions of years ago and developing precision medicines for the brain. But what if the potential could go beyond treating diseases of the brain? What if there could be potential in healthy brains, like yours? For centuries, cultures and faiths have used fasting as part of religious practice to increase mental clarity. For example, Buddhist monks eat one meal a day because they feel it aids the clarity of the mind before they do meditation. Islamic scholars use fasting because it sharpens their focus and ultimately reduces distractions. Time and time again, we hear that fasting is not just about sacrifice, it's about gaining a high level of mental clarity, a higher state of consciousness. Now, they didn't know about ketones and brain metabolism, but what they describe, sharper awareness, better focus, sounds strikingly familiar. Modern neuroscience is now describing and explaining these age-old practices. Today, we recognize that changes in glucose metabolism form part of a continuum. On one side, we have healthy brains, all the way through to diseases of the brain caused by deficits in brain metabolism, like Alzheimer's disease. And if ketones can treat these diseases through fasting, through the ketogenic diet, and through ketogenic pharmaceuticals, and if those same ketones can enhance the mental clarity in religious practitioners, then maybe those same ketones could have potential to enhance your brain. Could we enhance your brain's energy, improve your memory, improve your ability to learn? Perhaps the future of treating neurological diseases and of unlocking the full potential of human intelligence lies not in discovering something entirely new, but in rediscovering an ancient fuel for the brain. Thank you.